Before we begin the saga that reveals every trial of the Space Marine recruitment, leave your mark of honor, brothers. A like, a subscription, and a comment shall be your oath to the sons of Russ. Let your voices echo across the stars as the howl of Fenrisian wolves. So, you want to become a Space Marine? They make it sound glorious in the legends. Those angels of death clad in ceramite and holy zeal striding across battlefields as humanity's saviors. But let me break the news gently. The process of becoming one of the Emperor's mighty Adeptus Astartes is anything but gentle. In fact, it's a brutal, grinding ordeal that chews up countless hopefuls for each warrior it spits out. This is the drudgery of Space Marine recruitment, explained in all its grim detail. Strap in and perhaps grab a sick bag, because this job orientation makes a Katakan jungle boot camp look like a picnic in the park. From savage youth to aspirant, the road to Astartes' hood begins on some emperor-forsaken world where only the tough survive. The Imperium is huge with 1 million worlds, but Space Marine chapters don't recruit from just anywhere. Oh no, they prefer the worst places. Death worlds teeming with deadly predators, feral worlds locked in perpetual tribal war, or the violent depths of hive city slums where an average teenager has a kill count higher than an Imperial Guard veteran. These hellholes produce exactly the kind of half-wild, aggressive youths the Astartes want. In a peaceful, civilized world, you might find well-educated, polite kids, but polite doesn't cut it when you're trying to forge superhuman warriors. The chapters seek ferocity, resilience, and a killer instinct verging on psychotic. If you happen to be a murderous teenage gang leader from a hive under hive, congratulations, you've basically got Space Marine Recruit written on your forehead. Each chapter has its own hunting ground. Some, like the Space Wolves, take Born in Battle to the extreme. They recruit from Fenris, a world of endless tribal warfare and colossal sea monsters. Others, like the Ultramarines, have more structured methods, drawing from the best of several civilized worlds, their realm of Ultramar, where warrior academies train youths to peak human standards. Whether a tribal champion or a top-scoring cadet, the candidates all have one thing in common. They're exceptional survivors in brutally unforgiving environments. And they're almost always male and adolescent. The gene tech of the Astartes only works on males, and it works best on bodies that haven't finished growing. Sorry, ladies and old folks, the Emperor's Miracle Brew isn't for you. Typically, we're talking age 10 to 14 for initiation. Yes, they really do snatch up kids. By 18, if you haven't started the process, your bones are too set, your tissues too stubborn. You're more likely to end up as servitor fodder than a Space Marine if they try to convert an adult. On these recruitment worlds, most inhabitants might only know the Space Marines as mythic sky warriors or angels who appear once in a generation. Imagine the scene. A giant armored figure, a living legend, descends from the heavens and proclaims that the strongest young men must undergo trials for a chance at a grand destiny among the stars. In many societies, it's the highest honor imaginable to have a son chosen, even though the poor kid will probably never return and may die in agony in some laboratory if not on the trial field. But hey, honor is honor, right? Whole tribes, clans, or families yearn for that moment of selection, telling and retelling the stories of ancestors who were taken by the Sky Warriors. On more developed worlds, people have a better idea what the Adeptus Astartes are. They know that if little Janus down the street gets picked, he's effectively won the cosmic lottery and also signed up for near-certain death, but we'll get to that. In some places, having an ancestor inducted into the Space Marines elevates the family's status to nobility. Portraits of the Chosen One are hung in village halls, and people pray to his memory like he's a saint. All this cultural reverence piles on even more pressure for youngsters to prove themselves worthy when the angels come recruiting. The deadly trials. Now, the first major hurdle, and often the last for most, is the aspirant trials. No one becomes a space marine without proving in blood and sweat that they deserve it. Remember, each chapter is essentially a warrior brotherhood with its own traditions, so the trials vary widely. But arduous barely begins to describe them. The kind of tests an aspirant must face would make a Navy SEAL selection look like kindergarten. We're talking life or death challenges, often literally. Only a handful of candidates out of hundreds or thousands will pass. Many of the rest will die trying. Grim? Absolutely. Optional? Not if you want to join the Astartes. Some trials are cloaked in local ritual. A chapter might have subtly inserted their tests into a tribe's coming-of-age ceremony generations ago. So a teenage warrior might think he's merely participating in his tribe's sacred hunt or dueling rite, not realizing the Sky Warriors are watching from the shadows, judging his every move. Other trials are more overt. The Space Marines show up and openly challenge the youth to compete for the honor of joining them. Every culture is different, but the bottom line is the same. The trial is insanely hard, and most candidates won't make it out alive or intact. Let's go through a few common trial themes to give you an idea of what these poor aspiring souls endure. Trial by combat, blood duel. This is as straightforward and brutal as it sounds. The aspirants fight each other, often to the death, until only the strongest or luckiest remain. How they fight depends on the culture. It could be with stone blades and raw fists in a tribal arena, or with swords in a knightly tournament, or bare-knuckle brawling in some underhive pit fight. The blood duel is one of the most widespread methods because it's efficient. You want killers. Make them prove they can kill. On some worlds, it's a massive free-for-all or a bracket of duels, thinning the field from hundreds down to, say, a final 10. If the chapter needs, say, 5 new recruits this cycle, maybe the last 5 standing get the golden ticket. If they only need 1, well, last man standing is taken quite literally. And yes, sometimes to the death means exactly that. Aspirants might straight up murder their peers to claim victory. In other cases, it might be first blood or submission, with the Space Marine overseers stepping in before the winner deals a killing blow. But don't think that makes it much kinder. These fights are usually no holds barred, bones shattered, eyes gouged, bodies broken. The chapter's apothecaries can patch up a promising candidate who gets, say, his arm ripped off, if they really want him, but they're not going to bother unless he demonstrated something spectacular before being maimed. Many famous chapters use this kind of trial. Blood Angels, for instance, are known to host deadly combat tournaments among their aspirants. Their very name, Blood Angels, should clue you in that they are not squeamish about some bloodletting. The ferocious space wolves also love a good brawl. Their young warriors might engage in raw knuckle fights or blade duels as a test of courage and ferocity. Even the stoic Imperial fists have been known to pit aspirants against one another in harsh contests of martial skill. It's primal, it's savage, and it's brutally effective at weeding out the weak. If you emerge victorious, or just survive long enough to impress the judges in a blood duel, you've proven you have the raw physical prowess and killer instinct to be worth considering. Congratulations, that was the easy part. The Great Hunt, hunting the hunter. In many cultures, a rite of passage involves hunting a deadly beast. The Space Marines have happily co-opted that idea. Under this trial, an aspirant, or a group of them, is tasked to slay a fearsome predator that has been terrorizing the land, something that normal people consider unkillable. It might be a gargantuan venomous scorpion in the Rad Deserts, a man-eating swamp reptile, a massive wolf from the ice plains, or even a Xenos creature if the world has nasty visitors. Sometimes the aspirant must bring back a trophy, like the head of the beast, to prove success. In other variations, they have to capture the beast alive, which is as dangerous as it sounds. How would you like to lug a live, thrashing monster back home? This trial tests not just strength, but also cunning, endurance, and bravery. Tracking a predator through its own territory for days or weeks, often alone, with minimal gear, is a profound test of survival skills and nerve. The aspirant becomes the prey as much as the hunter. One misstep and he's a chew toy. Some chapters deliberately introduce exotic monsters onto their worlds to spice up the ecosystem, ensuring the locals always have some nightmare creature to fight, thus forging tougher young warriors. Yes, you heard that right. If a planet's natural fauna isn't deadly enough, the Astartes might secretly add a few extra man-eating critters to keep things interesting. Forget terraforming. This is more like terraforming. A classic example. The Space Wolves, them again, send their aspirants on the Trial of Morkai, where they must survive in the deadly Fenrisian wilderness and kill a massive Fenrisian wolf or a snow troll. Picture a young Northman tracking an ice-fanged superwolf the size of a car across blizzards, armed with nothing but a spear and raw guts. Most end up as bloody smears in the snow, but if one limps back to the fortress carrying a wolf pelt, you better believe he's earned a spot. The Dark Angels, with their knightly heritage, have a similar tradition from the days of Caliban. Aspirants might be tasked to hunt down a great beast, often twisted by chaos mutations, in the deep forests, a homage to their Primarch's legends. Completing a hunt trial shows the chapter that this kid has resourcefulness, patience, and the courage to face terrors head-on, all essential qualities for a space marine. Survival of the fittest, warrior's provenance. War is constant in the 41st millennium, and some chapters figure, why set up trials at all? Just watch these kids in their natural habitat, war, and pick the ones who thrive. On planets where life is an endless battlefield, the recruitment process can be as simple and cynical as observing the wars already going on. Many feral world tribes or hive gang territories are always fighting each other over something. Resources, revenge, you name it. The Space Marine recruiters, chaplains, or veteran scouts might covertly watch these conflicts from afar, tracking which young fighters distinguish themselves with bravery, skill, or a ridiculously high body count. When one clan or gang finally wins and stands atop the heap of corpses, the Astartes swoop in and say, "We'll take him and him. The rest of you, thanks for playing." In some twisted cases, chapters actually encourage or engineer these conflicts to ensure a steady supply of battle-hardened youth. There are tales of chapters subtly seeding rivalries among tribes, or even slipping in agents to stir the pot. They might limit a society's access to resources or introduce a rumor that one tribe's god insulted another's, anything to spark constant fighting. The logic is brutal but straightforward. Peace makes people soft. Perpetual war breeds tough survivors. By the time an aspirant is chosen this way, he may have already been fighting for years and likely has the scars and thousand-yard stare to prove it. The Space Wolves, again, are a prime example. They're perfectly happy to let Fenrisian tribes annihilate each other all winter, then pluck the lone berserker who walks away from the last battle. The Dark Angels and their successor chapters, too, have been known to foment a bit of rivalry on their recruiting worlds just to keep things from getting too cozy. It's a callous approach, essentially letting only the last survivor get the reward. But in the grim darkness of the future, compassion is a rare commodity. If you want a space marine, you first need a young man who has known nothing but war. Exposure and endurance. Not all threats come with fangs or blades. Sometimes the environment itself is the executioner. Many recruiting worlds have lethal climates, toxic ash deserts, radioactive wastelands, frozen tundras under constant storms, dense jungles teeming with poisonous flora and fauna. You name it. An exposure trial takes advantage of this. The challenge is simple. Survive out there alone for a set time, a week, a month, and come back alive. It's you versus nature, which in 40K often seems actively malicious. Aspirants are usually sent out with no support, and maybe just the clothes on their back or a basic survival tool. The point is to test fortitude, ingenuity, and absolute grit. If you're from a death world jungle where every plant wants to eat you, normally your community survives by banding together constantly. So what's the trial? Send you out by yourself into that green hell and see if you last until the appointed day. On an icy planet, they might leave you at point A and say, get to point B, 500 miles north, before the moons align. Cue a journey through blizzards that would make a polar explorer cry. In irradiated wastelands, maybe you have to cross the plains of glowing ash, where the air itself will rot your lungs without a filter. It might be explicitly impossible to fully complete. Many exposure trials are designed so no sane person could win, because the real victory is cheating death longer than expected. The chapter watches, perhaps with satellites or psychers, and if an aspirant endures far beyond what a normal human should, refusing to just lie down and die despite thirst, hunger, and mutated predators, they'll retrieve him at death's door and say, all right, this one's tough. He'll do. A particularly cruel twist some chapters employ is to drop the aspirant into an environment utterly alien to him. Imagine a tribesman from a desert, suddenly transplanted into a polar glacier field. He has no idea how to survive freezing cold, which makes it the ultimate test of adaptability. Or vice versa. A hiver who's never seen a tree is dumped in a carnivorous jungle. It's sink or swim, with the likelihood of sinking about 99%. The ultramarines, exemplars of logic, actually use exposure trials often. They believe hardship tempers greatness. There are legends that in Ultramar's history, some elite families would even leave their newborns out overnight in the wild as a first test of resilience. Hard to believe, but that's the Imperium for you. Congrats on the baby. Now let's see if he can handle being buried in snow for a night. The Space Wolves also do things like cast young fighters out onto the glacier flows or the fire plains of Fenris and tell them to find their way back. Those who do are clearly favored by Russ, or just insanely determined. Passing an exposure trial proves you can endure pain, isolation, and an uncaring universe trying to kill you. All necessary qualities for a space marine who often has to fight in environments that would kill normal men outright. Tests of spirit and psyche, knowledge of self. Space marines don't just need brawn, they need unshakable minds. The horrors they face, demons, alien terrors, the insanity of war, can break even strong men. Some chapters, recognizing this, specifically test the mind and soul of an aspirant. These trials are deeply psychological, often involving induced terror or spiritual ordeal. One method is remarkably high-tech, or high-psych. A librarian, that is, a space marine psyker, might put the aspirant into a trance and assault him with psychic visions. The poor kid will experience nightmarish scenarios in his mind, perhaps facing his worst fears made manifest, or being tempted with power by a whispering chaos demon, or reliving traumatic memories amplified to unbearable intensity. It's a controlled hallucination crafted by the librarian to probe the aspirant's inner strength. If the aspirant's mind bends or snaps, well, better to find out now than when he's in power armor holding a bolter. Only those who can stare down the worst manifestations of the warp or their own subconscious demons and not gibber in fear are deemed worthy. A cruder but equally effective approach is the use of psychoactive drugs and poisons. Some chapters will have aspirants ingest a potent herbal toxin or venom that causes severe hallucinations and physical agony. The aspirant might spend days in a delirious state wrestling with phantoms only he can see, essentially a self-induced nightmare. Many die from the shock on their system heart attacks, comas, or are driven permanently insane. Those who come out the other side, shaken but intact, are considered spiritually strong. They've literally been through hell in their own head and climbed out. Pain tolerance trials also fall in this category. Devices like the pain glove, famously used by the Imperial Fists, subject an aspirant to excruciating pain by directly stimulating nerves or sending electrical shocks for hours on end. The trick is, he can't just pass out. The pain glove is cunning. It'll keep you conscious. The aspirant must endure, possibly reciting liturgies or focusing his mind through the agony. It's not about if it hurts, it does. It's about whether you break. The Imperial Fists have a whole stoic philosophy about pain endurance. They consider it purifying. Many Feral World chapters do something similar in more primitive fashion, maybe suspending a young warrior on hooks, or ritual scarification, or an ordeal of poisonous bites, all to test willpower. The Black Templars, zealous knights that they are, have aspirants undertake long fasts and sleepless vigils, praying for days until they start hallucinating. A test of faith and commitment. Whatever the method, these trials ask, can your mind and soul bear the unimaginable? If yes, congratulations, you might not go insane the first time you see a greater demon rip your squad mate in half. If no, well, you probably ended up babbling on the floor or dead by your own thrashing, and the chaplain quietly strikes your name off the list. The challenge duel. This one's almost perversely unfair, and that's the point. In a challenge trial, an aspirant must face a fully fledged space marine in a contest. Yes, a scrawny, relatively speaking, human teenager versus a superhuman giant who has likely centuries of combat experience. Doesn't sound like a fair fight? It isn't. No one expects the kid to win. The real test is how long can he last, and does he have the audacity to even try? Often the Marine will handicap himself. Perhaps he won't wear armor, and will use only practice weapons or even fight barehanded, while the aspirant gets a blade or a gun. Even so, an unarmored Astartes is still a walking slab of gene-forged muscle who can crack concrete with a punch. These duels typically end with the aspirant battered unconscious or dead in moments. But on those rare occasions, one of them actually does something surprising. A clever feint, a fearless charge that catches the Marine off guard, or Emperor bless, lands a hit. That aspirant's stock skyrockets. The legend goes that if an aspirant somehow bests the Marine, say the Astartes really limited himself, or the aspirant is extremely gifted, that youngster is almost guaranteed to become a hero of the chapter someday. It's that rare. More commonly, the aspirant loses, but in a glorious way, refusing to yield despite broken bones, maybe managing to impress by standing up again and again. A chapter might stop the duel before the killing blow and say, "All right, that's enough. He's got guts. In non-combat variations, a challenge could be a contest of strength. Lift this insanely heavy object while a Marine does the same. You won't outlift him, but how close do you get? Or stamina, perhaps a foot race against a Marine. He'll obviously win. But do you collapse or push on to the finish anyway? It's measuring heart and determination by pitting mortals against demigods. The Ultramarines have been known to do this in their structured training camps. If you can spar with a veteran sergeant for even a minute without collapsing, you're made of the right stuff. The proud Imperial fists sometimes require aspirants to withstand a few rounds with one of their champions to test bravery and tolerance for pain. Many stories mention the Iron Snakes chapter from Ithaca, where aspirants have to fight an actual Astartes in ritualized combat as the final selector. They know they'll lose, but it's the courage to face a foe you cannot defeat that proves your worth. Often, when an aspirant is inevitably beaten in a challenge trial but shows promise, the observing apothecaries will rush in and save him from death, patching up wounds, maybe even throwing him in a rejuvenation tank. This one's tough. Don't let him die from that skull fracture. We need him. If he dies outright, well, he wasn't meant to be, or perhaps the Marine misjudged his punch. Oops. Either way, the chapter learns a lot about a youth spirit from these uphill battles. Brutal, all of it, isn't it? By design. The trials ensure that only the absolute cream of the crop, physically, mentally, spiritually, even get a foot in the door. And cream of the crop in a galaxy, this harsh still means these young men are monsters compared to normal humans. Each one is the kind of person who has killed with his hands, stared down nightmares, survived impossible situations, and kept going. If you think about it, a Space Marine is a giant among men. To forge one, you must start with someone who's already a giant at heart, and a bit of a maniac, truth be told. Statistically, the vast majority of aspirants never leave their trial alive. Those who do may be battered, scarred, forever changed by what they endured. For example, an aspirant who survives an exposure trial might wander back into his village half dead, only to find a towering Space Marine warrior waiting for him with a nod of approval. Perhaps another emerges triumphant in a duel, covered in the blood of peers he had to slay, knowing that his life will never be the same. Some aspirants don't even realize they've been in a Space Marine trial at all. If the tests were veiled as local rituals, a young man might suddenly be approached by an armored giant he thought was a myth, and be told, "Come with us, boy." Imagine the mix of awe and terror. One minute you're celebrating winning the tribal hunt, the next a huge gauntleted hand grips your shoulder and leads you to a shuttlecraft. You probably don't even get to say goodbye to your family. Actually, depending on the chapter, you might. Some allow a brief celebratory send-off in the community, others just whisk the candidates away immediately to maintain mystery. In many cases, the families and onlookers rejoice when a son is chosen. They assume he's off to become a demigod, and great honor will come of it. They're not wrong about the demigod part, but they have no idea of the misery in store for their poor boy. Anyway, those few who pass the trials are now officially aspirants, meaning they're accepted to attempt the process of becoming a Space Marine. Yes, all that, and they're still not actually Space Marines yet. They've just qualified for the privilege of attempting to survive the transformation. At this point, the recruits are often scooped up by the chapter's facilitators, typically the chaplains and apothecaries. A chaplain, a grim warrior priest in skull helmet and black armor, usually oversees the spiritual fortitude of recruits, while an apothecary, medic geneticist surgeon in white armor, checks their biology. The aspirants might be taken aboard a shuttle to the chapter's starship or fortress monastery that very day. Sometimes they wake up in a cell or medical bay with no idea how they got there. The Marines might sedate them for the trip to keep things orderly. However it happens, once they're in the chapter's custody, they are never going home again. Their old life is over, completely. From this day on, this youth belongs to the chapter, becoming a neophyte. The transformation begins. Now the real work starts. Those victorious young warriors, still human at this point, are about to be unmade and remade. They are called neophytes once they're formally taken in. Think of this as being a freshman in the most nightmarish school imaginable, where the graduation rate is tiny and the final exam might kill you. The chapter will perform a battery of tests on the newcomers. Just because you survive the trials doesn't guarantee your worthiness. Now, the apothecaries need to confirm your body can handle what's coming. There are thorough medical examinations, genetic screenings, and psychological evaluations. The gene seed implantation process, the hallmark of creating Space Marines, only works on certain genetic profiles. Only a small fraction of humanity is biologically compatible with the implants and the harsh hormonal changes they bring. So the apothecaries will poke, prod, take tissue samples, sequence your DNA, analyze your blood, test your hormone levels, probably make you run on a treadmill and lift some weights while they monitor vitals, etc. They're looking to make sure you don't have any genetic flaws that would cause your body to reject the gene seed organs. Things like predisposition to autoimmune issues, or perhaps too high a likelihood of undesirable mutation. Remember, each chapter's gene seed has its quirks. If your family line has some latent trait that doesn't play nice with, say, the Blood Angel's gene seed, they need to catch that now. If an aspirant is found wanting in this stage, maybe he's not compatible or has some taint. Emperor forbid any sign of chaos corruption or psycho mutation they weren't expecting. He'll be removed. Removed can be a euphemism for a number of fates, none pleasant. In the best case, he's simply told, "You have failed, you may not become one of us," and perhaps mind-wiped and dumped back on a planet, or kept as a menial. In the worst case, the chapter might decide any failed aspirant is a security risk. He's seen too much, and quietly execute or servitorize him. They really don't like doing the latter to their prized candidates, but the grim necessity of secrecy often demands it. So, if you're in that lucky top 5% who survived the trial, you now need to be in the lucky subset of those who are biologically fit for implantation. No pressure. Assuming you pass the genetic tests, you then undergo psychological screening. This isn't gentle sit-down therapy. Oh no. Chaplains or librarians might use psycho-indoctrination machines or even telepathic probing to scour your mind for weakness, impurity, or lingering loyalty to anything other than the Emperor. Are you truly faithful? Any hidden fears or doubts that might make you hesitate in battle? Are you mentally stable? Well, stable enough for a life of sanctioned hyperviolence? Since you were likely a savage youth or hardened ganger, you probably have a very aggressive mindset. That's good, but they must ensure you can be controlled and conditioned properly. The ideal recruit is aggressive but also trainable and loyal. If someone's too independent or shows signs of resisting authority, the chaplain will note that as a big problem. Space Marines need absolute discipline and unity. A lone wolf maverick, outside of certain chapter cultures, might get culled or re-educated harshly. At this stage, the chaplain might begin the first lessons of indoctrination, drilling into the aspirants the chapter's creed, the imperial truth, or the imperial faith, depending on chapter, and the notion that they are about to become something far greater than human and must leave humanity behind. It's a bit cult-like, honestly. But then, Space Marines are a cult in many ways, a cult of the Emperor's chosen warriors. The youths are often in awe. They're in the literal halls of their gods now, seeing things ordinary folks never dream of. Gene labs, armories full of power armor, holy shrines to the Primarchs. It can be overwhelming. The chaplains are there to harness that awe and mold it into devotion and focus. All right, so by this point, a handful of aspirants have survived the trials and passed the recruitment screening. Now comes the truly gruesome part, the series of implants and surgeries that will reshape them from human boys into transhuman space marines. There are 19 standard implants for the original firstborn marines, each one a marvel of bioengineering and, from the recruit's perspective, each one an ordeal. The implants are derived from the chapter's gene seed, essentially genetic material that traces back to one of the Emperor's Primarchs. Think of gene seed as a collection of specialized tissues or cultured organs that, when put into a human body, transform it piece by piece. This is not a quick process. It takes years and many surgeries, injections, and therapies. You don't just pop a pill and wake up a super soldier. The recruit will walk a knife's edge of survival through constant physiological upheaval. Implantation tends to happen in phases, corresponding roughly to certain ages or developmental milestones of the neophyte. The chapter ideally wants to start early, around age 10, 12, when the body is still growing rapidly. The implants can essentially ride that wave of puberty and warp it to their needs. If they've gotten a 14-year-old or older, time is short and the apothecaries will probably compress the schedule, with higher risk. Let's walk through the biological metamorphosis, and forgive me if I wax a bit clinical. It's equal parts science and nightmare fuel. Secondary, heart. First up, an easy one, relatively speaking. The aspirant gets a second heart implanted in his chest. Yes, a whole new heart. This secondary heart can kick in to boost blood flow or act as a backup if the primary heart is damaged. It's like having a spare battery for your circulatory system. If one heart gets blown out on the battlefield, the other can usually keep you alive. This implant, while invasive, is one of the simplest and rarely rejected. It sets the stage for the more drastic changes to come by ensuring the recruit's body can handle strain and has improved blood circulation for all the upcoming growth spurts. So, our friend is now a bicardiac adolescent. Neat, huh? He might feel a bit weird. 2 heartbeats thumping in his ears, but soon that becomes normal for him. Osmodula, aka the Iron Heart. This one is huge. The osmodula is a tiny gland implanted at the base of the spine, and it secretes hormones that massively restructure the skeleton. Over the next couple of years, this thing will make the recruit's bones grow denser, thicker, and larger. It literally alters bone tissue, fusing the rib cage into a solid plate. Goodbye, flexible ribs, hello, natural body armor around vital organs. It also deposits ceramic-based minerals into the bones, making them super tough. The end result? About 2 years after implantation, the kid's skeleton is no longer baseline human. He'll likely be at least a foot or 2 taller, his bones almost unbreakable, and his torso encased in an interlocking shell of ribs. The pain during this process. Oh, Emperor. Growing pains multiplied by 10. Imagine your bones stretching, strengthening, fusing. Some nights the neophyte probably lies in his bunk, shaking and sweating as his body literally reconstructs itself. But pain is instructive in the Astartes. He'll be expected to grit through it. The Osmodula is crucial. It is how scrawny teens turn into hulking 7-plus-foot space marines. Fun fact, sometimes this goes a bit too far. Certain chapters with mutated gene seed, like the feared black dragons, have an osmodula that overreacts and causes bone spurs to grow out of the forehead or arms, making literal bone blades. Black Dragon's fighters sport horns or bony crests and grow knives from their forearms, which they can use in battle. Pretty cool, if a bit grotesque. Biscopia, another gland implant usually done alongside the Osmodula because they work together. The Biscopia nestles in the chest and floods the body with growth hormones and muscle stimulants. Where the Osmodula toughens and lengthens the bones, the Biscopia supercharges muscle development. The recruit's musculature begins to multiply in density and efficiency. He packs on mass, but not just bulk-quality muscle fiber that gives tremendous strength. Over months and years, thanks to this organ, our once wiry aspirant becomes a powerhouse of physical might. Of course, he's also being fed a diet enriched with special nutrients, including ceramic dust for the bones, high-protein gruel, etc., to fuel this growth. The appetite goes crazy. The kid might eat 6 times what he used to and still feel hungry as his body devours resources to rebuild itself. Between the Osmodula and Biscopia, within a couple of years of joining, a neophyte looks less like a lanky teenager and more like a superhero who spent 10 years in a gym. If you imagine a superhero who's also a bit stretched, taller, and broader than any normal human. At this point, the recruit's physical changes are already dramatic, and we're only maybe approximately 3 implants in. Now, interestingly, around this phase, if the chapter has any special ritual substances they use, like the Space Wolves' Canis Helix or the Blood Angel's Blood Chalice, they often introduce it here to further catalyze the transformation. For example, the Space Wolves have a unique gene seed component called the Canis Helix, essentially a genetic cocktail drawn from their Primarch Leman Russ's genome. The wolf priests, their apothecary chaplains, have the aspirant drink from the cup of wolfen, ingesting this potent mix. It jumpstarts the gene seed organs and also bestows them with the feral predatory senses of a Fenrisian wolf, if it doesn't turn them into a slavering man-wolf beast outright. Plenty of space wolf aspirants fail right here. The Canis Helix is unstable, and those of weak constitution mutate into mindless, wolfen creatures. They must be put down or exiled. It's both a spiritual trial and a physical one for the space wolves. They see it as the spirit of the wolf, testing the candidate. Only if the aspirant's will is strong can he overcome the savage fury and emerge still in control, albeit now forever bearing a trace of the beast inside. The Blood Angels do something similar, but at a different point. After all their other implants, they perform the insanguination, a ritual where the aspirant drinks a bit of the chapter's sacred blood, said to be drawn from their Primarch Sanguinius's own blood, preserved for 10 millennia. In Blood Angels practice, aspirants are actually put into a deep coma in golden sarcophagi for a year after drinking this blood, letting the gene seed work its changes while they experience vivid dreams of Sanguinius's memories. It's an almost religious metamorphosis, culminating in them emerging as full Space Marines a year later. It's unique to the Blood Angels. Trust them to make a Gothic art form out of a medical procedure. But I digress. Back to the organs. Hemastamen. This little implant, usually next after the first 3, alters the blood itself. It tweaks the bone marrow and blood chemistry to be more efficient at oxygen transport and nutrient delivery. Space Marines have supercharged blood. It's bright red, almost scarlet, because it's so oxygen-rich. This helps keep their massively developing bodies nourished and oxygenated. The Hemastamen also acts as a control module for the previous implants, regulating hormone levels to make sure the bone and muscle growth induced by Osmodula and Biscopia doesn't run out of control. You can see the pattern. One organ sets a change, another monitors or refines it. The Emperor and his gene rights designed this process with careful interplay between implants. If one fails or is missing, the others might not work right, which is why losing gene seed organs is a huge problem for a chapter. Laraman's organ. Ever wonder why Space Marines seem to never bleed out, even from nasty wounds? Thank the Laraman's organ. It's a small liver-like implant that generates special Laraman cells, synthetic superplatelets. If a Marine is cut or shot, these cells rush to the wound and clot almost instantly, sealing injuries with scar tissue in moments. Essentially, Astartes blood clots so fast that only truly catastrophic wounds can make them bleed to death. Minor cuts seal in seconds. Deep gashes might close in a minute. This organ turns a recruit into someone who, by the end of training, can survive injuries that would leave normal medics shaking their heads. It's implanted in the chest cavity and wired into the circulatory system. By this time, perhaps a year or two in, a neophyte has at least 5 new organs humming away inside. He's taller, way stronger. His bones are like steel. He recovers from cuts and broken bones with astonishing speed, and his blood is turbocharged. He probably feels the difference. By now, he's likely outperforming any mortal human by a wide margin. But there's so much more to come. Next, the enhancements get increasingly specialized. Catalepsian node, implanted at the back of the brain. This is one of the neurological upgrades. It essentially allows a Space Marine to do without sleep, or rather, to rest only tiny bits of the brain at a time. A Marine can go for weeks without true sleep. The node triggers a sort of trance where half the brain snoozes in microsleep mode while the other half stays alert. Then they swap. The Marine can literally sleep with his eyes open, never fully unconscious. For a recruit, getting this implant means goodbye sweet dreams, hello being on duty 22 hours out of 24. Part of their training is learning to utilize this. They won't sleep like normal humans anymore, probably ever again. At most, a Marine might take a 4-hour rest that would equal a full 8-hour sleep for a human. And in emergencies, they can go 2 weeks with 0 real sleep, just these micro rests before needing a recharge. Pretty useful on those long warp deployments or sieges. Of course, plugging something into your brain is delicate. The surgery is risky, and a few aspirants might suffer brain damage or die on the table here if the apothecary makes the slightest error or if the body rejects the node. Also, when the node first starts functioning, the recruit experiences a bizarre period of adjustment. Imagine constant lucid dreams bleeding into waking life as the brain's sleep cycles get hacked. The chaplains probably keep a close eye to ensure no hallucinations or psychological side effects cause instability. It's usually at this stage, mid-teen years, node implant done, that hypnotherapy conditioning begins in earnest, taking advantage of the recruit's altered brain state. They plug the recruit into a hypnomat, a device that uses hypnosis and maybe direct brainwave manipulation to instill knowledge and condition reflexes. While he rests or sleeps, in that trance way, he hears the litany of the Codex Astartes, combat doctrines, target recognition images, maybe even historical lectures about the chapter's heroes. All of it repeated over and over, sinking into the subconscious. Over weeks and months of hypno-indoctrination, the recruit starts to think like a Space Marine. Lessons that would take years to teach in a classroom can be implanted deep in his brain. Things like battlefield tactics, weapon handling, language skills. He probably learns High Gothic and chapter battle cant this way, and importantly, unshakable loyalty and faith. He's being brainwashed, in the literal good way. The end goal is a warrior who doesn't hesitate, who follows orders reflexively, and who truly believes in the righteousness of his cause at a fundamental level. By the time this process is done, the recruit likely has only faint memories of his life before. If you asked him about his mother's face, he might struggle to recall, but ask him the proper prayer to appease a power armor machine spirit, and he can recite it in his sleep. The old self is being systematically erased and rebuilt into a space marine identity. Preomnor. Here's a handy organ. Basically, it's a secondary stomach implanted above the original one. The Preomnor is a pre-digestive vat that neutralizes poisons or indigestible stuff. A space marine can eat things that would kill a normal person. Toxic plants, raw monster meat filled with venom, and the Preomnor will typically neutralize the harmful elements before passing the food to the main stomach. This doesn't mean a marine can literally eat anything with no consequences, but it comes close. He's extremely resistant to ingested poisons. For our recruit, that means during training they might literally feed him all sorts of foul substances to test the Preomnor's efficacy. Dinner tonight is a bowl of local poisonous fungi with a side of rebreather filter juice. Enjoy! If he keeps it down and doesn't convulse, the organ works. If not, well, pump his stomach and try again. But usually, by the time it's active, it does its job. This implant, along with the next few, often get installed in one big surgery cluster to minimize the number of times they need to cut the recruit open. Major surgeries are grouped if possible, though doing too many at once can overstress the body. Omophagia, Remembrancer. This is one of the more horrifying ones. Implanted along the spinal cord and connected to the stomach, the Omophagia allows a marine to absorb memories by eating flesh. Yes, you read that right. If a space marine consumes a portion of a creature, especially the brain or other vital tissue, he can gain snippets of that creature's memories or experience. The original purpose is likely practical. Say you're on an alien planet. You kill a local animal and eat part of it. The Omophagia might reveal to you what that animal knew about its environment, like where water is or what predators it feared. In war, a marine could eat a dead enemy's flesh to quickly learn what that enemy knew. Battle plans, passcodes, etc. Gruesome but effective intelligence gathering. Of course, many chapters have turned this into ritual. Blood angels and their successors drink blood. Flesh-tearers, aptly named, or flesh-eaters might devour pieces of fallen foes. It's taboo for some chapters to use this ability openly because, let's be honest, it's cannibalism adjacent. But it works. Now, what's it like for the recruit? When the Omophagia is implanted and starts working, he might get hit with weird flashes of memory after meals. Early on, the effect can be unpredictable. They likely have controlled tests where they feed him the flesh of, say, a particular animal and monitor his reactions. It's a delicate thing. Too much or wrong flesh can overwhelm the mind, but gradually he learns to handle it. Importantly, this organ has side effects. It's why some chapters develop cravings. The Blood Angel's notorious red thirst, a bloodthirsty craving, is partially blamed on a mutated Omophagia, making them desire blood. There's an anecdote. A Blood Angel's successor, chapter called The Blood Drinkers, had such an overactive Omophagia that they literally had to consume blood regularly to stave off madness. They turned it into holy sacrament rather than shame. So, for our recruit, let's hope his chapter's gene seed is stable and he doesn't suddenly develop a hunger for human brains. If he does, that chapter's chaplains will have some interesting meditations for him. Multi-lung. This is a third lung, capable of processing low oxygen or poisonous atmospheres. After this implant, the recruit can breathe in environments that would choke or kill normal humans. High altitude, underwater, with a rebreather mix. Heavy toxins in the air. The multi-lung filters and grabs whatever oxygen is present, even if it's just trace amounts or toxic mixes. It has a unique structure with muscles that can close off the normal lungs and route all breath through the multi-lung when needed. So, a Marine can even drown one set of lungs and still use the third to survive. Not that they try to drown, but it means they can stay underwater much longer or in gas. During training, they'll test this too. Time to dunk the recruit in a chemical smoke chamber or throw him in a pool with weights. See if that multi-lung kicks in. It's all about pushing the limits. Oculobe. This organ augments the eyes. Surgical touches to the optic nerves and retina, plus the oculobe organ, result in vastly improved vision. A Marine can see in low light almost as well as daylight, and his visual acuity and distance vision become far superior to a human's. Sniper practice gets a boost when you've got oculobe-enhanced eyeballs. The recruit might notice his night vision sharpening. Dusk starts looking like noon to him. Useful, since the enemy loves to skulk in the dark. Lyman's ear. This upgrade to the inner ear gives Space Marines exceptional balance and immunity to dizziness or motion sickness. Spin a Marine in a gyroscope and he won't puke. He'll probably laugh. It also allows them to filter and equalize extreme noise. Some even claim Marines can sort of tune out certain sounds, like the truly annoying battle cries of orcs, perhaps. For the recruit, this might mean the days of motion sickness, if he ever had any, are gone. In training, they could flashbang him or whirl him around, and he'll keep his lunch down and orientation straight. It's a subtle but vital edge in the chaos of battle, where disorientation equals death. At this point, we're well into the implant roster. The recruit is now probably 15 or 16 years old, with a laundry list of augmentations. 2 hearts, 3 lungs, an extra stomach, a dozen new glands, tougher skin, sharper senses. He's not a normal human by any stretch, but we're still not done. The later implants are some of the most dramatic in effect. Sus and membrane. Installed in the brain, near the pituitary, this one is wild. It allows a Marine to enter a state of suspended animation. With training, a Marine can essentially play dead, slowing his metabolism to a crawl, perhaps to survive wounds or wait out a rescue, even if buried under rubble. In this state, he can survive for extremely long periods with minimal air or nutrients. There are instances of Marines entering Susae in hibernation after being mortally wounded, going into a coma that lasts years, only to be recovered and revived later to continue fighting. For a recruit, obviously they won't be put in stasis for years as a test, but they might practice inducing a trance where his heart rate and breathing drop massively. It's a sort of safety net. If he's gravely injured in the field, this membrane might kick in automatically, putting him on ice, figuratively, until an apothecary can save him. There's a recorded case of a Dark Angels Marine surviving 567 years in Susan hibernation. Crazy but true. Let's hope our recruit won't have to do that anytime soon, but if he ever gets spaced out of an airlock or something, it could keep him alive long enough to be retrieved. Melanochrome. Melanochromic organ. This organ hooks into the skin's pigment cells and other systems. It allows a Marine's skin to adjust its melanin and other pigment levels in response to radiation or ultraviolet exposure, providing natural protection. Basically, Marines don't sunburn. Their skin will darken or lighten as needed to shield them. In high radiation environments, their skin might turn almost ebony as the melanochrome cranks out protective pigmentation. Over time, this organ's influence plus gene seed quirks can result in distinct chapter skin tones. For example, Salamander's Marines are known to have coal-black skin and glowing red eyes, a genetic quirk likely tied to an overactive melanochrome combined with Nocturne's high radiation. Blood Angels and some successors often have an ashen, pale complexion, possibly a different melanochrome expression or other gene flaw. Anyway, our recruit's skin is now functionally radiation-proof to a degree. A side effect might be some change in complexion or eye color as the organ integrates. He could develop a different hue to the iris, or a permanent tan, or in Salamander's case, a very dramatic pigmentation. Oleitic kidney. This advanced kidney works with the Preomnor, stomach, and natural kidneys to filter blood of toxins even better. It can handle extremely dangerous poisons, but the catch is if it goes into overdrive detoxifying the Marine, it will put him into a coma while it works. Essentially, if a Marine is hit with an otherwise deadly nerve agent, the oleitic kidney might save him, but he'll be knocked out while the organ flushes out the toxins. So it's a trade-off. Survive the poison, but you might be lying unconscious on the battlefield. Still, better than dead. Under normal conditions, it just ensures very efficient waste filtering and bodily regulation. Think of Marines as having a supercharged liver/kidney system. They can drink the worst rot-gut booze and not even get a hangover. Though Astartes aren't typically party animals that way. Most of them consider alcohol trivial compared to the chemical stimulants and combat drugs they're sometimes given. For the recruit, it means his blood is practically a purified stream at all times. They might test him by administering a non-lethal dose of some toxin to see how fast he recovers. Not a fun test, but effective. Neuroglottis. An implant in the mouth that gives a Marine an incredibly advanced sense of taste and smell, to the point he can chemically analyze things by taste or smell. Yes, a Space Marine can literally lick a random puddle and tell you if it's poison, what the chemical composition is, or track an enemy by scent like a bloodhound. They joke that a Marine could taste a drop of someone's blood and know if that person was scared, sick, or what they had for breakfast. It's borderline superhuman clairvoyance via chemistry. In practice, this means Marines can detect toxins in food, identify trace chemicals in the air, or pick up a trail no normal human or device might catch. Our recruit, after getting the neuroglottis, might suddenly find food really rich in flavor, overwhelming even, until he adjusts. He might also do weird things like sniffing everything unconsciously to catalog his environment. It's an often overlooked implant, but it adds to the predator feel of an Astartes. They are truly hunters now, keen of every sense. Mucranoid. This one's a bit odd, but very useful for extreme environments. It's a gland that, upon activation, usually via a special chemical injection, causes the Marine skin to secrete a waxy, oily substance that coats the skin and can protect against extreme temperatures and even vacuum for a short time. Essentially, a Marine can cocoon himself in a protective barrier that helps with heat, cold, and pressure. Before going into stasis, like using the cis-an membrane, or for operations in chemical hazards, they might activate the mucranoid secretion to seal their skin. In training, they likely give the recruits that activating injection and watch as he sweats out a sheen of oily goo. It's not pretty and it feels gross, but it might save his life in space. Space Marines can survive the void for a brief time thanks to this, and they're multi-lung, not comfortably, but enough to maybe jump from a boarding torpedo through vacuum into a ship's breach, for example. The recruit probably now permanently smells a bit like machine oil when this gland is primed. No more need for moisturizer either, I suppose. Betcher's gland, perhaps one of the more colorful upgrades. These are two small glands implanted into either side of the lower lip and connected to the salivary glands. They let a Marine generate and spit acid. Yes, real acid, like a xenomorph style. A Marine can, on command, spit a corrosive enzyme that can burn through metal, concrete, what have you, given time. It's not like instantly melting a tank with one loogie, but it's extremely corrosive. A locked door's bars can be chewed through with a few minutes of acidic spit applied. If a Marine is captured and bound in chains, He might just discreetly drool on his cuffs to free himself. Also, imagine the surprise of any enemy who thinks they've got the big armored guy restrained, only for him to hawk a glob of burning acid into their face. Nasty. Now, as a recruit, this is one of those implants you definitely have to learn to control. You don't want to be secreting acid in your mouth all the time. The apothecaries probably train them by giving certain signals or dietary triggers for the gland. At first, the kid might accidentally burn a hole in his soup bowl when he drools in it at mess hall. Oops. Over time, he learns to only activate it when needed. Some chapters with gene seed issues might have dysfunctional Betcher's glands. For instance, in some lineages of the imperial fists gene seed, the Betcher's gland doesn't work at all. They can't spit acid, a minor loss, all things considered. But if everything works as planned, our recruit can now boast a particularly lethal party trick. I can eat through steel, literally. We've almost covered all the standard implants now. The recruit at this juncture is likely around 17 or 18 if things have been stretched out, or maybe as young as 16 if the chapter pushed them through quickly. The final two implants are absolutely critical. Progenoid glands, gene seed glands. These aren't about giving the Marine new abilities, but rather about preserving the ability to make future Marines. The progenoids, often called gene seeds, are two implants, one in the neck, one deep in the chest, whose sole job is to cultivate and store copies of all the gene organ genetic material. Essentially, as the other implants mature and take hold, the progenoid glands record their genetic codes. After a few years, 5 years for the neck gland, 10 for the chest, each gland is mature and can be extracted to yield new gene seed tissue to create more implants for new recruits. In plain terms, every Space Marine's body itself grows the next generation of seeds for the chapter. This is why a chapter's gene seed is so precious. They rely on recovering these progenoids when a Marine falls, or when they reach maturity, to keep the cycle going. If a Marine dies in battle, apothecaries rush to retrieve his glands. Each Marine carries potentially the legacy to make 2 more Marines, assuming both glands were mature and healthy. If those are lost, or if the Marine's gene seed was mutated, that's a blow to the chapter's future. For our recruit, getting progenoids implanted is a bit like puberty 2.0. Now he's technically carrying the chapter's reproductive organs, so to speak. It doesn't change his abilities, but it is a solemn thing. It means the chapter has invested in him fully, counting on him to survive long enough for these organs to mature. Many chapters hold a little ceremony or prayer when implanting the progenoids, emphasizing the weight of legacy the recruit now carries. In practical terms, the recruit won't notice much day to day from these, aside from maybe some discomfort until they settle. But the apothecaries will periodically check on them, maybe do a biopsy after a decade to ensure they're growing right. If, Emperor forbid, the recruit dies during training after progenoids are in, those will be harvested immediately. The chapter can't afford to lose even a single gene seed if it can help it. The black carapace. At last, the final implant, the capstone of a Space Marine's transformation. The black carapace is a unique organ, a sort of thin black fibrous layer that's grafted under the skin all across the torso. It looks like a cross between subdermal armor and a neural interface web. Once implanted, it connects directly into the Marine's nervous system with plug interface points that lie just beneath his skin in various locations. The purpose of the black carapace is to link the Marine with his power armor. Those plug interface points correspond to the connection ports inside Astartes armor. When a Marine dons his armor, he jack in, and the armor essentially becomes like a second skin, fully integrated into his senses and balance. Without the black carapace, a person in power armor is just wearing a big, heavy suit and would rely on servos and manual controls. With it, the armor's movements, sensors, even its machine spirit feedback, all feed straight to the Marine as if it were part of his body. Only now, after getting the black carapace, can our recruit truly be called a Space Marine, because now he can wear the iconic powered battle plate as it's meant to be worn. The surgery to implant the black carapace is extensive. They open up the chest and abdomen skin, lay this somewhat flexible organ mesh across the front, and I believe also some on the back. Then it bonds to the body. Small stud-like neural plugs will dot his skin afterwards, visible if he's shirtless as hard, coin-sized nodules like a pattern across his upper body. Post-surgery, once healed, the chapter's tech adepts will test it by hooking him up to an armor simulator or directly to a suit in a controlled environment. The first time a neophyte interfaces with power armor via the Carapace is a milestone. He suddenly feels the entire suit. It's overwhelming at first. Imagine suddenly being aware of a 7-foot-tall metal body around you, every servo's whir, the weight of it, and yet the strength amplifying your slightest muscle twitch. They train intensively at this stage to get him used to it, but after that, he will move in armor as fluidly as he moves in his own skin. The black carapace is the divide between initiate and full battle brother. With the black carapace implanted, the physical transformation is complete. Our aspirant is aspirant no more. He has all the organs of a Space Marine. If he's made it this far, he's basically a young Space Marine in physique and basic capability. Consider what he's become. He's likely around 18 years old, stands well over 2 meters tall, maybe 7 plus, with a massively muscled frame. He has 2 hearts pumping nutrient-rich blood, 3 lungs filtering air and drawing oxygen even from fume-choked atmospheres, and an extra stomach that can neutralize poison. His bones are like rock, his ribcage a solid plate. He heals quickly from wounds that would cripple others, and he barely needs sleep. He can see in the dark, hear beyond normal ranges, and track scents like a predator. His reflexes and strength are superhuman. He could probably bend steel bars and crush a human skull with his bare hands. He's been imbued with battle knowledge via hypno-conditioning and has likely spent countless hours in physical training, combat drills, weapons practice, and tactics simulations. In short, he's gone from a primal but mortal youth to an almost post-human engine of war. Training and indoctrination. It's worth emphasizing how much training accompanies all this bioengineering. While the apothecaries work on his body, the chapter's instructors work on his mind and skills. Days are filled with combat training, sparring with fellow neophytes, now careful not to kill each other. The competitive trials are over. These lads are all on the same team and precious to the chapter. They practice marksmanship with bolters and other weapons, starting likely with smaller arms until they can handle a full bolter's mighty kick. They run drills in squad tactics, learn battlefield communications, and study the enemies of man from orcs to heretics to tyrannids, often using hollow simulations or live captive creatures if available. A neophyte might spend an afternoon in the fighting cages practicing knife work, then an evening in the Reclusium chapel chanting the catechisms of hate, then midnight in a hypnomat session implanting tactical data into his brain, and dawn doing a 50-mile run in full gear over obstacle courses. It's intense, to say the least. They are forging not just a body, but a warrior who is utterly lethal and utterly loyal. Chaplains continue to oversee the spiritual indoctrination. By now, any notion of the aspirant's previous life, religion, or culture has likely been merged into chapter doctrine. If his tribe worshipped some sky spirit, he now knows that was just an aspect of the Emperor. The chaplain will frame it that way, perhaps. He worships the Emperor and venerates the Primarch of his chapter as his spiritual gene father. If the chapter has particular quirks, say the Space Wolves with their totemic animal sagas, or the Blood Angels with their artistic and sanguine rites, the recruit is taught these and participates in them. Rituals are big in Astartes life. They bond the neophyte to the chapter's culture. Some chapters brand or tattoo their recruits with symbols of achievement. Others have feasts. Yes, Space Marines can eat normal food. Lots of it, in fact, given their metabolism, though many develop very Spartan tastes. The recruit might have undergone a ritual celebration after each successful implant surgery, or a vigil of fasting and prayer before receiving the crucial ones. For example, the Imperial Fists are said to require a neophyte to spend a night in prayer before the altar of the Primarch, before he's allowed his black Carapace surgery, to ensure he's mentally prepared to join the chapter fully. The Space Wolves might have a howling ceremony under the moonlight to welcome new warriors. After they survive their transformations, they're called Blood Claws, the young hotheads of the chapter. Every chapter has its flavor, but all drive home one point. You are no longer merely human. You are one of us, bound by brotherhood and duty. The Emperor is your father now, the chapter your family, and war your purpose. During this training period, attrition can still happen. The implants are in, but some recruits might fail in other ways. Maybe one's mind breaks under the pressure. He develops instability, battle shock from maybe a particularly traumatic hypnotherapy session, or just the cumulative stress. Maybe one shows cowardice or hesitation during a live-fire exercise. Yes, they do, those. Often neophytes are pitted against real targets like captured beasts or even live foes in some war zones as training. A chapter cannot tolerate a weak link. Such failed neophytes meet harsh fates. The lucky might be mind-wiped and turned into chapter serfs, essentially servants who retain enough motor function to cook, clean, maintain armor, etc., but have no personal will. The less lucky could be lobotomized and made into servitors, cyborg automata, to perform mechanical tasks. Imagine spending all this effort only to have your brain fried and body repurposed to be a servo arm operator or a gun turret loader for the rest of your days because you flinched when told to charge. It happens. A Space Marine chapter does not coddle failure. On the flip side, if a neophyte is severely injured during training, say an accident costs him a limb or eye, they might give cybernetic replacements if they think he's still worth keeping. But if he's too broken to fight properly, he might be shunted to a serf role or offered an honorable death. It's tough, but the chapter can't afford passengers. A rare few who show particular talent but can't continue as line marines might be diverted to other roles. For instance, a neophyte with great technical aptitude might be sent to Mars for training as a tech marine. After becoming a full marine, though, that's usually later. Or one who shows a psychic spark might be taken aside for librarius training. Again, that's a whole separate ordeal, often involving testing on Terra or by the chapter's chief librarian. But those are exceptions. Most who falter are removed one way or another. By the end of this gauntlet, what remains is an elite core of young warriors who have survived every test the chapter devised and every surgical torture the apothecaries conducted. Scout to Marine, earning the power armor. After all the implants and basic training are complete, a neophyte usually isn't thrown straight into a frontline veteran squad. There's a transitional stage as a Scout Marine, at least in Codex-adherent chapters. The chapter's 10th company is typically the Scout Company, composed of these fresh initiates. They fight in lighter recon armor, carapace and camo cloaks, not full power armor, and carry sniper rifles, combat shotguns, or bolt guns with specialist ammo weapons suited to recon and asymmetric warfare. Why no power armor yet? A few reasons. 1. Power armor is a sacred, scarce resource. You don't slap it on a guy who hasn't proven himself in real combat under supervision. 2. Scouts often need to be stealthy or operate in environments where the bulky power armor is a hindrance. And 3. It's a final test. Can you perform without the full protection and strength of the armor, using your wits and enhanced physique alone? So our newly minted Marine spends perhaps a few years as a scout, learning the ropes of war in a relatively small team, often under the watch of veteran sergeants. This is where all that training is put to the real test against actual enemies. They might infiltrate an orc camp to mark targets, engage in guerrilla strikes on enemy supply lines, or act as forward observers calling in airstrikes. All sorts of dangerous missions that nonetheless temper their skills. It's said that a Space Marine truly earns his power armor through merit on the field as a scout. However, not all chapters follow that path strictly. The Space Wolves, notoriously, do it differently. Their newly blooded warriors become blood claws, essentially assault troops full of fury, charging into battle with chainswords and pistols alongside more experienced pack leaders. They slap those young space wolves into full power armor right away and point them at the enemy, counting on their ferocity. It fits the space wolves' culture. Valor and aggression are highly prized, and the idea of making a pup skulk around as a scout doesn't jive with their warrior ethos. Interestingly, the wolves invert the Codex's idea of a scout. Their wolf scouts are actually grizzled veterans who've chosen a path of solitary operation. So a grumpy old space wolf might leave the great company structure and operate alone behind enemy lines. Those are called wolf scouts, and they're anything but newbies. Meanwhile, their noobs are berserkers on the front line. Different strokes for different folks, or different fangs for different wolves, as it were. The Black Templars, a crusading chapter that operates without a set homeworld, also buck the Codex a bit. They have no dedicated scout company. Instead, they have a system where each neophyte is assigned to a fully fledged battle brother, called an initiate in Templar terminology, as basically a squire or apprentice. The neophyte wears a mix of gear, often a Carapace chestplate, and maybe pieces of power armor as hand-me-downs, and fights alongside his mentor in battle. The initiate trains him on the go in real combat. Over time, as the neophyte proves himself, he's gradually gifted more pieces of power armor until he's fully suited and can be dubbed an initiate himself. It's a very knightly, one-on-one mentorship approach, fitting for a chapter that models itself on a holy crusading order. It means a Black Templar neophyte might charge into a heretic trench right beside his master, learning by doing, under very close supervision. And if he falters, his mentor is right there to smack him on the helm and set him straight or drag him out of a fire, vice versa. Most other chapters, especially those descended from the Ultramarines, stick to the scout progression. Some might have slightly different flavors. Maybe a chapter emphasizes Devastator, heavy weapon, training first, or assault tactics. But generally, a Marine's career starts in 10th Company, Scout, then moves to Devastator squads, heavy support in a battle company, where he learns fire discipline, then to assault squads, fast attack, close combat, honing aggression, and finally to tactical squads, jack of all trades, backbone of the chapter. This is the Codex-approved development cycle to ensure a Marine is well-rounded. Of course, a chapter in dire wartime need might accelerate this. If casualties are high and they need replacements now, a neophyte might be rushed into power armor and thrown into a reserve company role earlier. That's risky for him, but sometimes necessity calls. Think of the Crimson Fists after the disaster of Rin's world. Their chapter was nearly annihilated, so the survivors had to recruit and train new Marines as fast as possible to rebuild. Scouts ended up fighting alongside veterans in critical battles out of sheer necessity, and their trial by fire was the real deal. It worked out for some, but many probably died filling boots too big too soon. Anyway, after a period as a scout, which itself can involve multiple combat missions, often extremely dangerous ones, because who better to send on a forlorn hope behind enemy lines than those who still feel they have something to prove? The neophyte is deemed ready to ascend to a full battle brother. This moment is essentially graduation from recruit status. It's often marked by a formal ceremony. The specifics vary by chapter, but it's invariably solemn and steeped in meaning. The final elevation. Brother Astartes. Picture a grand hall in the fortress monastery, lit by rows of candles and braziers burning incense. Banners bearing the chapter's heraldry hang from the vaulted ceiling. The chapter's heroes in their polished armor stand vigil, or perhaps just the company the scout is joining is assembled. Our recruit, now a capable warrior in his own right, likely spends a night in contemplation or prayer beforehand, remembering the fallen friends who didn't make it, swearing his final oaths of loyalty. At the ceremony, a chaplain or the chapter master himself might preside. The neophytes come forward one by one. They may kneel and speak sacred vows of devotion to the emperor, to uphold the honor of the chapter, to follow the codex, if they care about the codex, to avenge the fallen, etc. The chaplain might anoint them with sacred oils or draw the chapter symbol on their armor or forehead in blood or ash. Symbolically, they often receive their final piece of war gear here, their full power armor suit in chapter colors, and their bolter, the quintessential Space Marine weapon. Up until now, a scout wears scout armor, usually camouflage, not necessarily bearing the full livery. But now, for example, an ultramarine scout who's proven himself will don the blue power armor and the symbolic white helmet of a devastator, or red of an assault if going to those squads, or just the company markings. A space wolf who was a blood claw might earn the right to join a gray hunter pack, the more seasoned warriors, and mark his armor with a new pack totem. A blood angel neophyte would finally wear the blood red armor of the chapter, leaving behind the black Carapace training suit they often drill in. It's a powerful moment. In some chapters, the new Marine chooses a new name, shedding his childhood name to signify rebirth. This isn't universal, but it happens in some lore. The brothers all chant a welcome, perhaps banging gauntlets on breastplates in salute. The newly minted Marine stands and is addressed as Brother Name for the first time. He steps into line alongside his new squad, truly one of them at last. You can imagine the pride. Few humans will ever experience an honor such as this. In that moment, all the pain, loss, and effort crystallize into a single achievement. He is an angel of death now, a warrior of humanity's elite. Of course, trust a Space Marine. Chapter to not let them get too swell-headed. Usually right after the ceremony, it's back to work. There's often a baptism of fire coming. Maybe they're deployed to a battle zone the next day to truly test these new Marines. The galaxy doesn't wait politely for you to enjoy your graduation cake. If the chapter's at war, which it usually is somewhere, the new brethren will be sent off to do what they were made to do: fight the enemies of man with bolter, blade, and righteous fury. Primaris Marines. A new twist. No discussion of Space Marine recruitment these days would be complete without touching on the Primaris development. After millennia of the traditional processes described above, the closing years of M41, now in early M42 by the timeline, saw the introduction of the Primaris Space Marines, a new, improved breed of Astartes, cooked up by Archmagos Belisarius Call under Robute Guillemon's order. Primaris Marines have all the implants we listed. They're now often calling the classic Marines firstborn, plus a few extra. The Primaris organs, the sinew coils, Magnificat, and Belisarian furnace. Add even more muscle reinforcement, a boost to the effects of earlier implants, and a sort of built-in emergency adrenaline/redemption trigger that can kick a Primaris into overdrive healing or strength when he's on the brink of death. They are, on average, a head taller and even stronger, faster than firstborn Marines. Crucially, their gene seed was refined to be more stable, less prone to those mutations and flaws that crept into some legions over 10,000 years. The chance of genetic deviancy each generation is extremely low for Primaris gene seed, or so the tech priests claim. Now, Call created tens of thousands of these Primaris Marines in labs during his long project. Basically, fully grown, fully trained, via hypno-indoctrination, Marines who were kept in stasis until the time was right, the Indomitus Crusade, after Guillemon woke up. Those awoken Primaris were just gifted to existing chapters, or formed into entirely new chapters, the Ultima founding. Imagine old chapters seeing these shiny new Uber Marines arriving as reinforcements. Some were grateful, some suspicious. Are these real Marines or Martian witchcraft? Many a crusty chapter master wondered. But beyond that initial influx, the Primaris tech also allowed existing Marines to be crossed into Primaris. A dangerous surgery, but many survived and essentially gained the new organs. And important for our topic, new recruits can now be made directly into Primaris. Essentially, chapters got an upgrade to their induction process. They can decide whether to make a given neophyte a standard firstborn Marine or to give him the Primaris organs along the way. Given that Primaris seem objectively better soldiers, over time, presumably all chapters aim to produce Primaris as the norm, unless some stubborn traditionalists refuse. From the recruit's perspective, does this change much about the Nightmare Gauntlet? Not really, except maybe it adds a couple more surgeries to endure, and perhaps a slightly higher chance of survival due to improved gene tech. Primaris gene seed is touted as more stable, so possibly fewer organ rejection deaths, though it's still not anywhere near 100% success. If anything, one could argue being a Primaris recruit might be even more trying. Those extra implants further stress the body. But this is the cutting edge of Imperial science, so presumably Call tried to streamline it. Time will tell how Primaris integration fully shakes out in every chapter. But one thing is clear. The basics of Astartes recruitment remain cruel and unforgiving. Whether you're destined to be a firstborn or Primaris, you're still going to be that kid fighting tooth and nail in a death arena, or toughing out the wasteland alone, or letting an apothecary saw open your ribcage to shove in another organ while you bite down on a leather strap, or even remain awake reciting the litany of fortitude to not scream. Some apoths insist on that to gauge pain tolerance. The Primaris process didn't eliminate any of that. It simply tacked on a bit more. In fact, some chapters had to wrestle with tradition versus innovation. Imagine telling a proudly steeped in ritual chapter like the Blood Angels, "We have some new organs for your recruits." They'll incorporate it, but probably weave it into their mystical rhetoric. "By the blood of Sanguinius, we shall make you even stronger. 3 more miracles to bless your flesh." Ultimately, Primaris are space marines. Their recruitment, aside from those initial mass-produced ones, converges with the same grim pathway of trial and transformation we've described. The few, the proud, the transhuman. At the end of this arduous journey, our once aspirant stands as a brother of the chapter, fully equipped and ready to serve. The chapter likely holds a feast or celebration in the newcomer's honor. Some do a big feast where the new Marines sit at table with the veterans for the first time as equals. There might be toasts to their courage and somber mentions of those who fell along the way. Perhaps the names of the fallen aspirants are engraved on a roll of honor. They did give their lives pursuing this duty, after all, and that sacrifice isn't taken lightly. But likely just as many chapters deliberately erase those names, considering them not to have been truly part of the chapter. Each chapter's culture dictates that. Now the real work of a Space Marine unending war begins for them. But here's a comforting thought, or not. In many cases, actual combat against the Emperor's foes is less deadly to a Marine than the process that got him there. After all, a full Space Marine is one of the most formidable warriors in existence. Ironically, he was at greater risk when he was a half-trained kid on an operating slab, or dueling his friend to the death for a chance at this life. That's the price of admission to the Adeptus Astartes. Only the absolute best of the best survive, and only the ruthless grind of selection and bioalchemy can forge a true Space Marine. Think of the staggering attrition. Out of 1,000 kids from a hive, maybe 100 show promise enough to be tested. Out of those 100, maybe 10 survive the brutal trials and get picked. Out of those 10, maybe 5 pass all the genetic checks and implantation without dying or going insane. And perhaps 3 to 5 make it through training to become full battle brothers a few years later. Maybe even fewer, depending on gene seed issues or the chapter's strictness. And this isn't considering that some chapters simply have lower recruiting rates or smaller pools to draw from. It's a slow, exacting process. That's why a chapter can't just replace heavy losses overnight. Even if you had 1,000 great candidates, the actual conversion pipeline might yield only 100 Marines after several years, if you're lucky. If a chapter loses too many veterans too fast, say in a disastrous campaign, it could take decades or centuries to rebuild, because recruitment and training impose a natural cap. This is one reason the Codex Astartes fixes a chapter at approximately 1,000 Marines, not just to limit power, but because more would be very hard to maintain with stable gene seed supplies anyway. The unseen toil. The phrase drudgery of recruitment truly fits when you consider the behind-the-scenes labor involved. For every aspirant undergoing trials, there are chaplains and apothecaries and serfs working tirelessly, observing tribes, setting up tests, maintaining medical equipment, preparing hypnotapes, cleaning up the mess. Yes, someone has to haul away the bodies of all those who failed, grim work, often done by chapter serfs who themselves might be failed aspirants given a second chance at servitude. There's also bureaucratic and ritual paperwork in a sense. The chapter keeps records of each recruit, their lineage, their progress through implantation. Gene seed tithe to Mars must be accounted for. Periodically, chapters send a portion of harvested gene seed to the Adeptus Mechanicus as a tithe for broader Imperium use and safeguarding, meaning the apothecaries have to decide which precious progenoids to give up. A lot of effort goes into not only making a Space Marine, but ensuring the chapter's genetic legacy continues untainted. The apothecaries might run regular purity tests on the gene seed cultures, monastic labs filled with vats and incense as science and faith mingle. It is toil, and it never ends. As Marines die in battle, new ones must be raised. A chapter that, for a time, has peace still continues recruiting in small numbers to replace those lost to training accidents or the slow attrition of decades. A chapter at war might aggressively step up recruitment, which could mean more frequent or harsher trials on their homeworlds to get more candidates quickly, perhaps pushing the limits and losing even more of them. The cycle is constant. To the common Imperial citizen, Space Marines are legendary heroes appearing fully formed. They don't see the blood, sweat, and tears behind each one's creation. But we see it now. The next time a battle brother in glorious power armor charges forth chainsword revving, know that his true steel was forged not just in that battle, but in the crucible of recruitment, in the sparring pits and deadly hunts of his youth, on the cold slab of an apothecary's surgery table, in the endless nights of hypno-conditioning and prayer, and in the trials that broke countless others but not him. Conclusion. The making of a Space Marine is a saga of sacrifice, pain, and uncompromising dedication. For every one Marine who stands indomitable against the enemies of mankind, there's a trail of bodies, of those who weren't strong enough, fast enough, or lucky enough. Leading up to that moment, it's a price the Imperium is willing to pay, and the aspirants themselves are often eager to pay it, for the chance to transcend their mortal limitations and become a living weapon of the Emperor. What might seem inhuman in its cruelty is precisely what's required to defend humanity in a galaxy of endless horrors. The Astartes are not born, they are built with blood and iron, faith and gene seed, one painstaking step at a time. So, if you've ever daydreamed about how cool it would be to be a Space Marine, perhaps now you appreciate the reality. The process to get there would likely have killed you 3 times over, and definitely made you wish you'd stayed home on the farm. The glory of the Space Marines is earned through unspeakable hardship. In the end, that's what makes them what they are, and why they are so feared by humanity's foes and so honored by the Imperium. Each Marine is a triumph of will over limitations, of engineered perfection over frail nature. Each one is an extraordinary individual forged by an extraordinary trial. This, then, is the drudgery behind the Divine Warrior. Years of toil and terror to create the ultimate soldier. It is a harsh crucible, but from it emerge the Angels of Death, the Space Marines, the Emperor's chosen, whose mere presence on the battlefield can turn the tide of war. They are few in number, but each is worth 1,000 lesser men. Now you know the truth of how they come to be. It's not romantic or pretty, it's dark and grueling, and often thankless. But in the grim darkness of the far future, heroes aren't born, they're made. One agonizing trial at a time, forged in suffering and tempered with an unyielding purpose. And that, aspirant, is the price of becoming a Space Marine. Victorus aut mortis, victory or death.